You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
Right Up Meridian, baby.
All right, folks. Welcome back to Right Up Meridian. Scott here with you another week. And excited to have Dustin Dopirak on from the Indy Star, Pacers beat reporter. We'll get to him in a second. I was at the game on Monday. That absolutely sucked. That was frightening. I was actually with Tony Adrania, our co-host here most of the time on the Right Up Meridian podcast. So maybe Tony's bad luck, but we're definitely going to talk about Haliburton on this pod, talk about the injury. But all I can say is that's the best bad news I've gotten in a while. Just the grade 1. Hopefully only out 2 weeks, so that's really good. But man, that was a bummer. And there's a moment, I think, as all Pacers fans, like, why can't we have nice things? Like, I look back to last, I think it was 2 years ago when Giannis like hyperextends his knee, and you're like, all right, well, that's done. He's out for a year and a half. No, just comes back the next week, wins, beats whoever. I think the Celtics, and then they go on and beat the Suns in the finals. And it's like, everybody else it doesn't seem to happen this way. But, we have Paul George. He breaks his leg. He's out for a year. And then it's like you see Haliburton go down, and it's like, come on, man. But I'm so happy for him that he's not going, at least it looks like he's not going to miss the All-Star game. As a fan, whatever. We're here. I'm just so happy for him. The All-Star game is here in Indy. He's the leading vote getter as the guard. It would be an absolute shame if he was not able to start and play in the All-Star game here in Indy and kind of be the mayor of this All-Star game, because it feels like that's the way things are leading up to. So hopefully he's back in 2 weeks, and we'll talk about it more on the pod, but just wanted to get that out up here on the front. And now look forward to our discussion with Dustin from the Indy Star. All right, Dustin, excited to have you back on. Kind of do this monthly. I started in the open. I will say this. I think we got the best of the worst news that we could get with a grade 1 hamstring pull. We got to start there. That's, it sucks, but it's I think the best that you could have after you basically see Tyrese do the splits on the court, which was bananas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the my kind of thought of maybe something might be really wrong was less the the split itself. I was like, okay, that
his
looks
reaction
like it really
was
sucks. But when it got carried off, it was like, oh man, like he can't even, like, and it was sort of. It was a rough scene because he's leaning on James Johnson and James Johnson is carrying him like he's carrying his child.
Yep.
And that was sort of like and there's a towel over Tyrese and you imagine what's going through his mind is that this is over. That this is as good and as magic of a season it's been for him, and as much of a skyrocket as he's been on this year, it's like, oh, this is all going to end right now because my foot slipped. It's that simple. That's how fast it can go.
Didn't he also say this is the first time he's really been injured too? Like he hasn't dealt with that?
I don't think I don't know if he said that. But
okay.
He obviously had the elbow sprain last year. And the knee bone contusion and everything like that. There's not a like ACL tear in his past. He doesn't have like a year where he sat out. Where even Miles Turner's got one of those. From high school. I think he had to miss a year. And I can't remember if it was an ankle or a leg or what it was, but he had a major injury. And a lot of guys have some in their past someplace, whether it was in junior high or high school or college, where they've missed a lot of time. And Haliburton doesn't have one of those. I think he had a wrist or something at Iowa State, that cost him some time. So he's never had one of those like it goes and you're like, oh my God, it's over sort of deals. Like he's had stuff that's kept him out. He's had some extended injuries, but nothing quite like that. So I don't think he's ever had that kind of shock that he had where it's just like, oh God, what is that even? That I've never felt that sensation. What does that mean? Oh God, something's torn. And so, he probably had that sort of fear and terror going through your mind of like, oh, I can't walk. What happens now sort of deal. So,
and this was it's obviously just a slip, but it's like he had slipped earlier in the game as well.
Yeah, he did. Wiped out.
Yeah, and it's
wiped
like
out.
I read somewhere that he was wearing high tops and normally wears low tops. I'm like joking with friends, like let's stay in low tops, Ty. Like,
Right,
I mean, again,
exactly.
it could just be two totally random things, but it does like both the same side of the court, both kind of weird, like planting slips, and so it's like I think we stay away from those high top shoes now.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way: I don't like casting aspersions on people who have these kinds of jobs, but they need to be a little bit quicker on the mop duty on the other night.
Well, he also wiped out there at the beginning of the in-season tournament. I think it was the court, but like the first game they played on the weird court, he slipped out on that side too. So it's like, let's just make sure we're top-notch mop on both sides of the court.
Mop duty, yeah, exactly. You got to be really, really on top of that, man. You're protecting a very valuable asset.
No kidding.
That man makes enough to buy an island. Or at least he will once that kicks in next year. So make sure that guy is healthy. Definitely. I think tough, really, tough deal there. But I think, I don't know. There must have been just some condensation. Happens. I mean, it's basketball, guys. It is a hardwood surface, and guys sweat the entire time they're out there. So there is a constant amount of liquid hitting the floor, and you've got to be on top of it. And it's tough, to be all over that. But it definitely seems like what happened. I mean, Haliburton slipped, and he definitely was like looking back at the mop guy, like, hey, on the first one. Because he wiped out, and obviously it was kind of more safe because he just lost traction on both feet and just, flipped, not flipped, but sort of like turned over. So fortunately he came out of that one okay, but this one was one shoe went one way and the other one did not. And that's obviously what put him in that situation. But yeah, again, end of the day, for that to be grade 1 is a good deal, is a much better deal. You're certainly talking about a substantial amount of games. Because 2 weeks is 7 games. Yeah,
who basically is going to miss that entire West Coast trip. Like their home tonight we're doing this Wednesday. Home tonight against the Wizards, going to miss base that whole trip. But it's actually maybe it works out well. It's like they go on the trip, he stays here, and then hopefully he's back that week. I think they play like Denver, the Sixers, and the Suns, and maybe he can come back for one of those weeks. Although I would also say neither of us are doctors, obviously. Ease him back in, because as I brought this up many times, like, when that happened, I'm sitting there at the game with Tony Adrani. He was at the game with me. And it's like, I've brought this up many times. We're kind of like the Pacers are locked into this like 6-9. Like they're probably going to, like, even at that, I'm like, not knowing what it was at the time, it's like, dude, you can't tank. Like you're not going to be able to tank. Like I'll pull it up. It's like the Pistons, the Wizards, the Hornets all suck. Like you're never getting underneath them. And you're also like, it's like you're kind of locked into the play-in. Maybe you try and make the playoffs. So it's like, I think all of that still stands. And it's like, if you miss 5 or 6 extra Tyrese games, it's not ideal. But like, there's a much bigger picture here to look at. Like trying to get to a 6 seed or get to a full actual playoff series, I think is the goal this year. And you don't want to. There's no point in rushing him back for 2 games in January.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously, you got to be smart about it. He's your franchise. He's the whole thing. I mean, you're not. And hamstrings. Miles Turner pointed this out when he had a tight one earlier this year, and they sat him out. He's like, you've got to give hamstrings time. It's very important, because you tear that sucker and you're in trouble.
Right.
And so it's just like, it becomes an issue. It stays an issue.
Right.
And so it's just like, they're tricky. And it's like when your hamstring's yelling at you, it's just, okay, give it a day, give it time, whatever. Yep. And so, I mean, it is almost eerily similar to last year as far as the timeline, the injury last year. Because it's 3 days prior. So I mean, that last year the Knicks game was January 11th, and the Celtics game in this case was January 8th. And not long after, they went on a trip that included Denver and Phoenix. It wasn't it wasn't as long of a road trip, but it was at least a couple of the same trips. Portland, Sacramento, and Utah were all on the early one, like late November, early December. Western road trip, because you basically get 2 of these, every year, where you have a Western road trip, whether it was West Coast or not. But so that it's kind of eerily similar. And Tyrese went on that one, even though he was never going to play. It was understood from the beginning that he wasn't going to play, but they just wanted to have him because it's Tyrese. Like you want to have him in the building, and it's I mean, I could just tell you the difference. Like you walk into pregame locker room, even if Tyrese isn't playing, it's a livelier joint It just is because, and he's oddly like kind of more relaxed when he's not playing. Like, it's fun for me to go in there, in pregame locker room because Tyrese.
Do you think he'll go on this West Coast trip then, based on this, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think the specifics of the injury tell me probably not.
Yeah.
Because I think it requires a lot of treatment. Whereas I think the last one was just kind of let it heal, do nothing, let it heal. Where you're dealing with a hamstring, I think you want to be doing with you want to be spending as much time with trainers as you can. So I would lean to no, because it's just, you're going to want to be working on it. You're not going to be wanting to get on planes. You're not going to be wanting to
go to random beds and hotels and travel.
Yeah. Random beds and hotels, be sitting in a chair on the bench for 3 hours, for 2 hours. All that kind of thing. My guess is
makes total sense
that's stuff you don't want. And again, non-zero possibility he still makes it because again, he's valuable. Like his mind on the bench is valuable. His spirit on the bench is valuable. Does it help you win games? Maybe not, but certainly makes you feel better when he's around. He can see things that other people can't see. James Johnson does that too when he doesn't play. But Haliburton just again, like IQ is so far off the charts. You can't even understand it. And so, he's going to be able to tell, not McConnell, but like Buddy Hield, hey buddy, you got to go over there. Ben, you got to go over here, like that kind of thing. Or this guy's doing this, you got to cut that off. There's just things that he can see that other people can't see. And so I think there's a value. There is something to be weighed. I ultimately think at the end of the day, the equation weighs out that the amount of treatment that you could get at home on a hamstring versus the amount of treatment you could get on the road. Because you can get treatment on the road. Obviously, all these guys, a bunch of these guys travel. But you probably you're probably better off if you have zero chance to play. You're probably better off, just spending that entire time with the, trainers at home and having the facility to yourself, and getting to do whatever you want over there. So ultimately, I think that's the way it weighs. It's just this, I think, is more of a treatment injury than it is a just sit around and heal injury.
Makes sense. Well, and it's good news. Now, I want to set the table. I mean, it's good news. Like that's grade one is like the best you could hope for, and then it's just you kind of wait and just no news is good news for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Let's set the table here because last time we talked was right before the IST. And this is two things I'll kind of highlight and kind of let you just give you open rein, no real question here. But what I love about this team this year so much is they go to the IST. I'm not breaking any news here, and they lose the Lakers, and then they kind of have a bit of a swoon, like. They have the ball gate thing at Milwaukee. We don't need to get into that, but it's like that to me felt very much, I've mentioned it many times, kind of Icarus-like maybe a little too close to the sun, maybe feeling a little too high for yourselves. And then they have the 4-game losing streak. And at that point, and then they, beat Charlotte, but then lose 2 more, Memphis and Orlando, both kind of winnable games. Although Memphis, I think Ja was back, but the Orlando one was like, that was gettable. It's like, it kind of felt like, oh no, like this might be like, they might've gone too hot. Cause then you're looking at this like tough schedule ahead. And then they peel off 6 straight wins, twice against Milwaukee. And it's just like whenever it feels like maybe the not chips are down, it's like they rally back. And even the game, against the Celtics last night or 2 nights ago, like Haliburton goes down and it's like, all right, well, this is like the Celtics are a tough matchup anyway. Now you lost Haliburton and like they're already up like 9 or something when, middle of the third quarter. Dude, they come out with their like focused hair on fire. TJ McConnell is playing out of his mind. They win that game. Maybe a couple of calls go our way. Who cares? Like they played so much heart, so much. It's like this team picks itself back up and it's like, oh no. Like we are not out. It really, it's really a fun team to watch, and it makes me like, dude, I'm excited to go tonight with no I'd rather watch Haliburton. Like without Haliburton to watch the Wizards who suck. It's like it's a fun team that continues to pick themselves back up every single time they kind of get hit in the mouth.
It does. I mean, it really has great personalities.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. And that matters. And I think, there was an immature, they kind of needed to get popped in the mouth the way that they did after the IST and be sort of reminded that they do have certain issues when it comes to getting up for teams that they think that they should smash. And I mean, it is a problem, and it'll be a problem tonight. They have to, I do think they still, even though they're going to be playing without Haliburton, they come off of Wednesday night thinking we're still good. And they do have to remind themselves the Washington Wizards can still beat them.
Yeah.
bad as the Washington Wizards are, you just have to be constantly reminded. And they say this out loud, and they know this is true, and they yet don't internalize it.
Yep.
That every terrible team in the NBA has great players.
Yeah.
Great players. The Detroit Pistons are one of the worst teams that we've ever seen. Cade Cunningham is awesome.
Yeah.
Oscar Thompson is going to be really good.
Yeah, Bogdanovich is like a pro. He's a professional basketball player who can get 20 a night.
Jalen Duren has muscles that neither you nor I knew existed until we saw them on him.
Yeah.
And like they are terrible. They can't beat anybody.
Yeah.
And they've got dudes. And that's how good this league is that no matter who you are, like you have dudes, you have guys that on a given night can summon something that is indescribable. Like the Wizards, Jordan Poole can score on you. Kyle Kuzma can score on you. Tyus Jones is a winner. Daniel Gafford is a heck of an athlete, and that team is atrocious. So it only takes a couple false moves, no matter who you are, no matter who you're playing, to get beat. And so they're aware of this, and but from time to time they tend to lose this message, and they tend to come out with just not the kind of fire that you need. But they are capable of summoning something when they're playing a team that's hard to beat. I mean, like the Miami game when they went out and beat the Heat when in Haliburton's previous injury when he was sick and throwing up and I don't know if he was throwing up, but like he just said he couldn't get up and walk that day, respiratory and everything. Then, like it shows that they have this capacity that they can rally even without Haliburton. They're much more capable of that this year than they were a year ago. They've got so much depth. I mean, they've been playing 11 guys, and all 11 of those guys can contribute. And the guys that aren't playing can contribute. Jarris Walker, Jordan Nwora, and Ben Shepherd, if they had to play, can do it. Like they are useful guys, and they're still not getting minutes. And Haliburton's injury doesn't guarantee them anything. Those guys probably still won't play.
Yeah.
Well,
no, and that's what I think is so like, and I think they all know this, but it's like, this is the slog of the season where you got to beat those teams like the Wizards. Cause to me, the upside of this Pacers team is they have that ability when the lights are bright, like they play their ass off and they can win. They beat, they really have no point beating the Celtics, 2 times so far this year. The Celtics are a phenomenal. Again, I know Tatum wasn't playing either, so you got to take that into consideration. And when they beat them in the IST, Porzingis wasn't playing, but still, like they go and they beat the Bucks twice. They can beat the best teams, which tells me like if they can get into the playoffs and play a series, like I think they're going to be a real tough out in the playoffs. Yeah. But it's like if they don't take care of business and kind of tonight's a random January 10th game, if they don't do enough of this, they're going to put themselves so far down the pecking order that they might be worn out going through a play-in before they even get into the playoffs. Like get yourself to a point where you're in the 6 or 5 seed.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think, obviously a big key, I think, is just to stay with this. I mean, there is this pack now that's forming. And like, obviously, you have to stay ahead of the next one.
Right.
Is the most important thing for them right now is to not fade back so that you're with Brooklyn, Chicago, Toronto, Atlanta.
Yeah.
You want to stay as close, even if you kind of lose a step on them in this upcoming period. Because you're going to lose probably at least one game you wouldn't lose with Haliburton. You got to presume that. But the goal is, I mean, if they can get 3 out of 7, like that's a deal. But so that means grabbing games like this. That means beating the Wizards. That means beating Utah at Utah. That means beating Portland.
Yeah.
Portland. If you go out there, you got to presume you're getting beat by Denver. But if you got to be competitive there so you don't feel like you're embarrassed. Sacramento, you at least want that game to be competitive. You can probably beat Atlanta, certainly if Atlanta decides that it's just not going to play defense like it did at Gamebridge last week. You got to grab those games where you can't.
To be fair, not just Gamebridge, all season they haven't played defense, but
dear God, have they not? But oh man, I mean, like Caitlin Cooper pointed this out, and I agree with her. That we've watched some really bad Pacers defense, and somehow that Hawks defense was worse than any Pacers defense we've seen. And that is saying something. But no, to get back to the point, I think you want to stay there and make sure that you're not fading back to the Brooklyns. If you can stay with the Knicks and the Cavs and the Heat and the Magic, just at least be on their heels, even if you're not in that pack any. Even if you're right off their heels after this, you're a game or two back of that group, that peloton, if you will. You're still in good shape. You just don't want to be fading back with Brooklyn and Chicago and Toronto and Atlanta. Like, you just have to stay in the breach between those two, and that I think is really, really key for them. And that means beating the Wizards. It means beating the Hawks. It means taking the wins that you can get. But I think they're capable. I mean, I think there was a lot of confidence from beating Boston. But like, I mean, again, you look down the line and it's still like there's not. You don't have a star that keeps you in there like Haliburton does, but that's going to make you wrong when you're right, right when you're wrong. I mean, and basically like just will you by getting 10 points in the last minute or 2 minutes or something like that. You don't necessarily have one of those guys, maybe Mathurin kind of, but you're going to need more collective action. But there's a lot of collective talent there.
Well, that leads me to my question.
Guys who average double figures.
You're leading right into my question was, so let's say Haliburton's off for 2 or 3 weeks. That's like you said, 7 to 10 games. Who do you think could benefits, maybe not the right word, but who do you think can grow the most with that responsibility? Who are you looking at on this team and be like, I think this is a real opportunity? I have one person in mind, but I'm curious your thoughts on like, who do you think this is a real opportunity to kind of take this and grow into maybe a bigger role?
Mathurin.
Yeah,
I mean, I almost never.
In the last 4 games, his numbers have been off the charts. Like, well,
yeah, I don't write a lot of take stuff, period. And my editor Nat Newell suggested that I write a case for Benedict Mathurin to start, and I rarely do it, but I think it's right.
Yeah.
I wrote one today that's just basically like, here's the case for Benedict Mathurin. It's not heavy on opinion, because I don't like writing that way in general. It's just not my style. And also, I don't like telling Rick Carlisle what to do because he's been doing this forever.
Right.
If I go too far out on that limb, he's going to just crush me at the next presser. He might get me tonight. But I mean, I just think it's obvious. I just don't think that if you don't start him, and I think you can move him right back to the bench when Haliburton gets back, because he's been much better on the bench. But I don't think there's enough scoring in that first unit if you don't have him in there. There's just not a guy that you can lean on scoring wise. I mean, there would be 5 good players if you just promote Nembhard and you keep Brown where he is and Nesmith where he is and Jalen Smith where he is and Miles Turner where he is. There's not a guy that can just go get you buckets. They all have to come, like they can all score within the flow of the offense. And there's something to be said for that. But there's got to be a guy that can get him out of the flow, that's your late clock guy. If those are your 5 on the floor at the end of the game, that you can go just say at the end of the game, go get me a bucket. Benedict Mathurin is the only guy that, is the only guy left that you can say that. And Carlisle went so far as to say it himself. I mean, he said, like, he's one guy on our team that can create a shot in ways that nobody else can. And so I think you got to have that guy in your starting lineup. And, it should be noted, he had this opportunity last year in a similar circumstance. He did not play well.
Right.
They started 4 games and he got pulled. And so that has to be noted that, did try it before, didn't work. So if Carlisle doesn't do it, he has that to circle and say, look, like, we did this last year, it didn't work, so why would I try it again? But the counter argument is that he's better. As much as he has maybe not taken the same trajectory that you want, like, it's not like the trajectory has still been upward. It just hasn't been at the same angle that it was, for last year when he was 6-man before that injury. And basically where it seemed like, okay, like him playing at an all rookie caliber, you're like, man, this guy's on a rocket ship. He's going to be, an all-star, all NBA caliber talent, where like this year he hasn't made that kind of stride. You would have hoped if he averaged 6.7 as a rookie that he's somewhere in the 20s. And he's obviously lower than that. But he is a lot more complete player. He again hasn't been as fast as you want, but is still better than he was last year. I mean, I think, I pointed out a really smart play he made. I think it was kind of an obvious play that, like, okay, like if you pitch this to somebody, you say, well, what's the right call? Or like, well, this is an obvious decision. But, Benedict Mathurin can be bullheaded when it comes to, I'm going to go get my shot. Like, he's the most bullheaded player on the team by leaps and bounds. And that's not argumentative. And those guys would all tell him that to his face, and frequently do. But he's right elbow got Kristaps Porzingis in an isolation situation, and he is licking his chops. He starts, crossover dribbling like big guy, I got you. You got no chance standing in front of me. And Derek White sees this and says, well, this is a disaster. I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen. And he comes over to double team. And rather than Mathurin saying, well, F you, I'm coming at both of you guys, he passes to Aaron Nesmith. Nesmith makes a real sharp cut in front of Jaylen Brown, hits a turnaround in his face, draws the foul. Mathurin gets really pumped up about that because he made the smart call. And like everybody's looking at that. There you go, Benedict Mathurin. That's what you do. That is recognizing that you have achieved gravity, and that you can make a play off of them deciding that they're not going to let you beat them. And seeing that, and that's growth. That's something maybe he doesn't do a year ago. Maybe he tries to go way out of that.
I agree with all of that. And, you look at this, it's a small sample size, but it's 6 games. His last 6 games, he's over 15 points in every game. Of 4 of those games, he's over 20 points. And his usage
efficient.
is going up, but the offensive rating, he's over 120 or 100. He's over 116 in all but one of those games, and one's 116. He's over 130 in most of those games, like 120. His offensive rating is staying up over the 120 mark while he's increasing his usage and increasing his point production. It feels like he's starting to take off. And so I agree with you. It's like, this is a moment where it's like, all right, Ben, if you're going to be that, number 2 option with Haliburton, which that's for the Pacers to really supercharge, that would be the easiest of all options, as opposed to trying to going out and getting somebody who's 23, who's a stud. It's it's really hard to do. If he could just be that guy and start scoring 20 a game at this kind of usage and this kind of rating, then we're there. Because also his defensive rating, not to mention, it's over 100 in every single game. His defense has, I feel like, taken a step up too. I think him playing with Nesmith has helped and kind of being like, oh, that's what a lockdown defender looks like. Yeah.
Right, exactly, and it conscientious, that kind of thing. It all of that makes a difference. I mean, he's getting a little bit better at all of these things. It's still it is an adjustment because his style of play does not naturally fit in with Haliburton's.
Right,
it has to be molded into that, because he is a guy who, again, Haliburton just said, we've been trying to get him to just catch and shoot more because he likes to dribble, and Mathurin is aware of his full array of offensive skill, and he can on some level be that guy who's getting guys in isolation and attacking them and whatnot. But with Haliburton, the ball is supposed to
the offense doesn't move that way.
No, exactly. The ball is supposed to pop, and you get a catch and shoot opportunity and take it. You don't you don't wait and try to cross the guy up and step back and whatever. It's Tyrese gives you a cookie, and you pull up and knock it down. Tyrese will set you up so that you have space and time. Don't think about dribbling, and don't think about whether you can go dunk on this guy. Take the shot he gave you because he set you up for a reason. And that's what he's got to be better at, because, and it's just important then he becomes a better 3-point shooter.
Yep.
He's a pretty good one. He's not Buddy, at his peak. He's not peak Buddy. And so that's why Hield has been a better partner so far, because Buddy ain't dribbling, when it comes to that. Buddy will dribble and score and everything like that, but when Buddy gets a clean one, Buddy's taking it. Buddy's not, he doesn't think twice. Where Ben is like, well, what if I can go dunk on him? I'm only 35% from here, this isn't a sure bet for me. Let me see if I can go cook this guy. Buddy is like, I'm taking that one every time, and I believe it every time.
So you bring up Buddy Hield. He's been a constant discussion on this podcast, and will be for the rest of the year, because I bring this up, and again, I always preface it Hield is the best is the perfect player to play with Haliburton. They are friends. They played at Sacramento. He knows where to go. He catches and shoots. It's fantastic. But part of the NBA is, can you play? Part of it is your contract. And I'm saying all things that but it's at $19 million a year, he's an expiring contract. The Pacers have to do something. I just don't think they can let that asset leave for nothing. I also don't think, if the Pacers are going to build this team, I'm not sure you can afford to pay somebody like Hield $20-25 million a year if you're going to have Haliburton at 40 in 2 years. If you're going to have hopefully somebody else in that 40 spot, it's just the salary cap just gets real tight real quick. It's a whole different discussion. I just don't think, I think there's going to be 2-3 guys making a ton of money, a bunch of guys making 4 to 5. We're in a weird figuring out spot. Guys like Hield are the ones that are going to get hurt, but that's between their union and themselves. Anyway, I continue to come back to Hield because it's like I think he's perfect for Haliburton. I just don't know if they can afford him, and I continually look around like what are the Pacers going to do? Because I think it's tough to trade him, but you almost have to get a confirmation you're going to re-sign him because he is a real asset in this league. And letting him leave for nothing is kind of like what the Raptors did with Fred VanVleet, and it's kind of like what are you guys doing? So I'm just curious your thought. I'm going to continue doing this till we get to the trade deadline.
Yeah. Sure. No, I mean the side note with it is it like, if you do let him walk, I mean you still get his cap number.
Yes, it's expiring.
It expires, and so like if there is a value to riding him out and taking the points and the shots through this year, and letting it go.
That's fair.
And so like that's not ideal. Like that, I'm not suggesting that's the ideal thing, but
I'm with you, and like if that gets you into a first round series, like it's better than like I hate when it's like we traded for like 2 second rounders. That's like you're gonna not do anything with those anyway. So I hear you on that. Yeah.
The bottom line is you can't waste it. Like and it's I think like to your point, it's more of a waste to trade him in February for draft picks than it is to keep him, take his production and let him walk at the end.
Yeah.
He is not a piece that you throw away. He is a piece that you pair with other things to get a better player. And so that's and to make your team better in certain ways. I mean, whether you can, if you find yourself in a situation where it makes sense to package him with other, trade a package for a package, that's possible. I mean, obviously, like if generally as a fan, like an outside observer right now, you're thinking, okay, like because we don't know what names are going to be on the market yet, there's still, the play-in certainly complicates things because you just don't know who's going to be in slash and burn scenario. And the other piece to it is that the teams that are play-in level on in the West are the superpowers. That's a very strange scenario in the West that you have Phoenix, the Lakers, and Golden State all in that 8, 9, 10 range. And, when you're a lesser team, when you're a lesser franchise and you're not them and you're not thinking title all the time and you're in play-in level, you're like, oh, maybe we're fading out. Maybe we need to retool and start over, I think some of the East teams, certainly Toronto and Chicago are in that place where, there's do we bother going for this or do we blow it up and start over? The Lakers and the Warriors are not going to blow it up and start over. So they're not in a scenario where you could look at those teams and say, well, what can you get from them? Because, those guys aren't getting traded. Nobody's trading Steph Curry and LeBron James or anything like that at the deadline, or Klay Thompson or any of those guys.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's just honestly, yeah. I mean, Klay's like it's basically the same problem. It's like another guy who is a great 3-point shooter who's making 40 million. I mean, he's a double the problem, making 50 million.
There aren't pieces that you can move on anyway, and it's just the shape of the deadline doesn't look very broad right now. Obviously Anunoby already got moved.
Yep.
You saw a high price for that. And so you just say, okay, like if that's what they wanted for Anunoby, can you even give them what they want for Siakam? Because that's certainly the name, I think, the one name that everybody says that, and side note on this, I don't know, would you trade Buddy? Buddy's expiring for Pascal's expiring. Well, God, yeah, of course you would. But obviously that's not going to work. So would you trade Buddy and some other assets for Pascal on the hope that you can resign Pascal? He says he won't, but you can get him to Indiana and he'll be like, wow, this is fun. I don't want to leave. That's good. I mean, that's your sales pitch, is saying like, okay, like even though Siakam says he's not going to resign with anybody who trades for him, like your belief is that this is the whole point anyway, is that when someone comes and plays with Tyrese, then you're going to want to stay.
Yeah.
And so that becomes an issue. So if you can parcel him together,
I also think it goes without saying, the Pacers, and I hope this is the case, but I think we are there, that, they understand that, Tyrese is friends with Buddy Hield, and so not that like we don't need to hand over the keys, but it's like I do hope that it's like whatever you decide to do, it's like Tyrese doesn't need to be the GM, but needs to at least be kind of involved. And it's like, hey, if we're gonna move Buddy Hield for X, Y, or Z, at least Tyrese is like somewhat involved. And like that was always my thought, even with the Walker pick, is like I was telling friends, like I hope like when Tyrese was sitting on like he should be involved. Like I don't think he doesn't make our draft picks, but it's like as you said before, he's the face of the franchise, and it's like he should have a say in who he's playing with, and at least has a seat at the table.
Yeah, no, I mean, Kevin Pritchard was explicit as to how that was going to work. I mean, we talked to him about that in April, because Rick Carlisle said, that basically there was a meeting, and we said, like, Tyrese, you're a partner in this now.
Yeah.
And we sort of got the next, so that was like exit interviews with players and coach and Carlisle. And then the next day we got Pritchard. And so we asked Pritchard about that, say, oh, this is what these guys just said. What's that mean to you? And Pritchard was pretty, explicit in just outlining the contours of what that meant. He said, I'm never going to put it on a player because I'm the guy. I'm the president of basketball operations. I make the decisions, and that's what I get paid to do. So I'm not going to put that on a player that's not what that job is. That's my job. But I'm absolutely going to consult Tyrese because not only and he said not only because he's my best player, but he's uniquely good at this.
Yeah.
Like he's it's not just okay, like I'm always going to give the best player, the highest paid player, this kind of abilities. Like Tyrese watches college basketball. Tyrese watches all of these guys. I mean, and this is true. Like you can have a conversation with Tyrese. He gets it. Like if you wanted, if his legs split off and he was in a wheelchair and he had to go get another job, that you could put him on TNT tomorrow.
Yeah.
And he'd be right there with.
Or he could be a GM. I mean, it sounds like he could be a GM too, from what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's more to that, but like he gets
yeah.
the game as a fan, but as a basketball mind, really, really well. I mean, like we had, it's from time to time he'll just go off, and you just get to listen to him talk through, things. He was just. I remember we were walking out of Detroit, and he was talking about what they need to do, and he's like, and I won't put that out there because it was off the record, but it was still like you sort of watched him think like, okay, well, what do they do now?
I'll ask you this: when after he was done, do you think to yourself he's right?
Yeah, God, yeah. Well, he's right. I mean, like obviously part of it is like I look at it, it's like, well, you're obviously going to see things I don't see, but like, I mean, his he really gets it, but he follows it like that. I mean, he's following all of this like like
he watches League Pass. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He watches League Pass. He's got every notification coming up on his phone. He's reading stuff. Like, I mean, Tyrese is locked in, but he knows these guys and he thinks of it that way. And so the thing is, like, Pritchard looks at it as like, well, like, why wouldn't I use this resource? This guy really, really gets it. And so he was at every draft workout, darn near every draft workout. Well,
as we talk about the trade deadline, so we'll probably have you on right before or maybe like right after. Like back to the Hield thing. Like I've also said, I'm curious your thoughts on this. I've also been saying this, that I think, you never know, and David West is maybe the best free agent the Pacers have ever gotten. So it's like we're not a free agent destination. But when you look at, Paul George this offseason as a free agent, Siakam's a free agent, OG is still a free agent this offseason. Yeah. I've kind of looked at it like, Tyrese is plugged in. Tyrese has been on Paul George's podcast twice. Like he seems plugged into this, and it, you heard like Obi Toppin say like he wanted to play here even before he had offers. He's like, I want to play with that dude. Like there's a world where if I'm Pritchard, I kind of look at it like, again, I don't think you have to see value in Hield, but like I'm not sure you need to put all the chips in now and trade assets to get Siakam. Like I think there's a better than 20 to better than zero chance that you might be able to get a free agent this offseason that maybe you don't get because of Tyrese Haliburton. And so if you can sign one of those guys in free agency and keep all your dry powder, like I think it's almost worth an offseason to give that a chance and kind of be like, hey, Tyrese, can you get us Paul George? Like, can you go get him? Because you can get him and we can keep all of our stuff and all of our picks. Now we have all that powder to go get another dude later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they're doing that and trying it. And that's, I mean, like, I was fascinated with how coordinated it was around the in-season tournament. And like, Haliburton made a point to get that message out through Woj. That was, and like certainly we could discuss the ethics of Woj as a concept. And I don't fully understand it well enough to be like, all is when Woj says it's true because people are making a point to tell Woj because they want it out there. Like that's why that explains all of it. Like how that fits in the ethics of journalism, I'm not going to even begin. But the bottom line is if something comes through Woj, that's because somebody wanted it to.
Right. It was planned. Yeah.
And like that whole, like he said, I had this conversation and basically like Woj basically, threw out the recruiting pitch for the Indiana Pacers, through that discussion. And so I thought that was interesting because the Ty blatantly said it. So then I made a point to ask Ty about it, to not about what Woj said, but the concept of recruiting. And he did not blink on that. Like, it wasn't like, well, I don't do that. Like, he's just like, he said, just watch what you see. Just trust what your eyes tell you. As far as he's like, and he, kind of not backtracked, but went and said, I'm about the guys that are in there. But, he did say, look, like, I am looking at these guys, like I am trying to get this message out that this is a fun place to play. And that is their message. And so, obviously there's is that enough? Because, like if you're Paul George, you are in Los Angeles, like, and it's just, there are resources there. Paul is obviously trying to be a multimedia figure,
right?
I mean, he got his own podcast. He's, when you're in LA, there's things that you can do with that you can't do in Indianapolis, and or maybe that you can't, that are harder to do. Like obviously Pat McAfee's operating out of Indianapolis and he's managed to make a whole bunch of money doing that. So it's not like you can't do it here at all. Like a podcast can be filmed in anybody's basement in any town in America, but all the same, like there's just if you have grander designs about what you're going to be, LA is a tough place to get somebody away from.
Yeah.
But like he recruited Bruce Brown, like certainly made Opie happy with the idea, Opie's having a blast.
Yeah.
And so you can sell all this. And so, like there is, there's a counteractive question of what's it mean to be the second guy? What does it take to fit with Tyrese as his second and to establish yourself above the rest of them?
Right.
Like there's an open question as far as that's concerned, but to be a, additional piece, looks like a blast, don't it? And
no, it's so, like they look like they're having a ton of fun.
Yeah. I mean, exactly.
Yeah, and this is where like I've also said, and we can kind of start moving on or wrapping up. Like roll that down, but it's like as you look at this, because I think it's fun as fans to think about this, but I also think if you're the Pacers, you got to look real long and hard. Of you forget it's like Mathurin's 22, like Haliburton's 23, he's not even 24 yet. Yeah. Like if you go and spend a bunch of capital to trade to get George or Siakam, like I've done this on other podcasts, it's like you're kind of creating the wrong timeline. Like Paul George is 31. Like we're still 4 years away from Haliburton hitting the start of his prime. Like you almost need to go look at like a Lauri Markkanen or a Scotty Barnes who come in free agency in 2 years. And again, like clawing away those dudes from other teams, it's not easy, but it's like it's a conundrum in a good way and a bad way the Pacers are in, is they're so young. But it's like if you get Paul, like let's just pretend it, you go out and spend a bunch on Paul George. That's great, but it's like you kind of created a weird 3-year window before Haliburton might be ready. It's like that's when you look at these great teams like Steph and Curry. It's like they're the same age or they're really close. Like Pippen and Jordan. It's like they're basically the same age. Like you don't normally see this like two parallel timelines going, and that's where I think the Pacers are in. It's a great spot to be in, but it's also like you've got to traverse this carefully.
Right, exactly. And it's kind of the kind of piece you need and what age you want it to be.
Right.
And it's like you can create a generic idea of what you want from it. Like if you were to say, okay, what would be the best thing they could get right now? It'd be a 24-year-old, power forward who can defend and shoot. Yeah. And score, good enough to be a number 2, but most importantly, can really just provide enough resistance that, a multi-talented power forward isn't scoring 40 on you every night.
Right.
Like that's the most important piece is to get somebody like that. And so, Paul George fits that mold, Pascal Siakam fits that mold. Fits that mold, but they're 31. Right. And they're expensive. Or 30, 31, in that range. And so that's your point. Like you want that guy, but at 24, 25. Yeah. And so
I look at the Mavs as like, to me, that's what you don't want to do is like they went all in early and now it's like you've kind of like they are now at that same cap problem that like the Lakers and the Warriors have. They don't have a title, and it's like you've kind of built this monster around Luka, where it's like you now have Kyrie, who's may or may not be the best fit, but it's not like they're not on superpowers, and it's like you kind of you went in too early, and now you're kind of stuck on these huge contracts. Like Kyrie's unmovable. It's like it's like they have to be careful here to not go too early, too soon, and be like, oh, Paul George is the guy. And then it's like, if it's not working, it's like, well, shit. And then you're just on this treadmill of like, now you're one of the teams trying to unload the $50 million guy.
Right. Exactly. And so I think, you got to be picky. I mean, I don't think George would fit, Siakam, again, he's older and there's that issue. You can much more easily talk me into Siakam than George. For one thing, he's just not as big, not that George is like a mega star,
right?
On the LeBron, like Giannis level or anything like that. But he's a big enough deal where like Siakam is a great player who on some level has flown under the radar.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like your casual fan doesn't know him as that Siakam is as good as he is.
It's kind of like Paul Gasol going to the Lakers with Kobe or something, where it's like, this is, people didn't fully realize how good he was, but it's like he was.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And Gasol's a little different because Gasol was also just a really good passing big man. And
great. Yeah, not the best comp, but just more like a kind of an under the radar player. Yeah.
Gasol fit perfectly because you couldn't have Kobe competing with Shaq anymore. Like you needed a big man who was willing to defer, that would still score, could do all the things you need him to do, but was willing to lift Kobe up and say, you are the guy. I am very clearly the second guy and have no interest in being the first guy. And Siakam, I don't know where he fits with that.
Well, and the thing with Siakam for me is like, it's kind of like, he may be right, but it's like it's only because he's like, there's only so many, expiring free agents this year. It's like, maybe this is like, my larger point is like, the NBA, you never know what's going to happen. It's like Bill Simmons brought this up. It's like total joke, but like, would the Pistons just blow it up and trade Cade Cunningham? I'm not saying Cade's right, but it's like, that's interesting. Like if you could, now you're on the age timeline. It's like, I do think if you're a Pacers fan, just because Siakam and George are available this offseason doesn't mean they're the right fit. Like sometimes just, again, you have so much time here, you don't want to totally waste it, but it's like, you don't need to just go in on, well, this is the only guys available this year, we got to pick one of them. It's like, no, maybe you wait for the right guy, which isn't as much fun as a fan, but it's like, that's better team building.
Right, exactly. I think you're just looking, it's like when you have a question, you want an answer. Like that, that's kind of thing. When you have an outstanding question of who is this guy going to be, you want an answer and you want to start throwing names at it. And like when you start thinking about it and you've come to this is the best possible answer, you now want it moved on. Like it's just, these are sort of natural tendencies that you have when you're starting to say like, okay, like what is the problem? How do you solve it? Yeah. And, like it's just like, okay, well, this is the best possible solution right now. Like it's you'd rather take the best possible, your natural inclination is to take the best possible solution right now, then wait for another solution to materialize. Even though there is enough time for it to materialize, like you don't know that it will, so you take the solution that is materialized in front of you because it is concrete and you can do something with it. And so that's just a natural desire, I think, as a fan or as a team or anything else. Like, and the counter to that, why you still have to do that is like you have to realize players get impatient too.
Yeah.
And because we have this you do have this ring culture thing of believing that like to be a really great player you have to win a ring. And so like you get antsy. As a player, you get antsy. If you're Tyrese Haliburton, you're going to get antsy because you want to be in that discussion. And if, I don't know, like Shai is, right now the Thunder are the 2 seed in the West, and he's got his guy to be paired with in Chet. And that was natural. He managed to get those two together just through the draft. And you're like, okay,
trade the draft,
like so it's just like, all right, oh yeah, trade draft, yeah. So, but if you're Shai, you're like, okay. Or if you're Tyrese, you're like, okay, well, I got to stay with that guy because eventually he's going to be a guy I'm going to get judged against.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, the windows also, like, as much as I'm saying they're young, it's all true, but like the windows close quickly, and like you never know how long your window is, and it's also like,
and he's only on a 5-year deal. Like, I mean, like he's he'll be 24 when the deal starts.
Yep.
The max deal, and so that he's 29 when it's over.
Yeah. And the thing with that 35. Deal, it's great, but it's like in 2 years, once he starts making that 45 million or whatever, like suddenly the cap economics get narrower, and like suddenly now you have less to spend. So that's where like right now, this is where the Pacers have such an opportunity is you have a first team All NBA type player on your team making like, I don't know, like
5 million.
Yeah,
6 million.
6 million. It's like
that,
you have an 18-month window where you basically have something that every team would die for. And so you could go out and get two other max guys before his max deal kicks in, and you're not hitting the luxury tax for 3 years. Like that's I think where I think the impatience does sometimes come from as a fan. It's like you could go out and get, it doesn't fit, but like Siakam and Paul George. Like go spend $80 million this offseason. Anyway, we're in the la-la land now.
No, exactly. But it's interesting. It's all interesting discussions. And it just reaches back to the point that to stay on this track, these guys without him have to stay where they are.
Yeah,
because that makes you because that makes you think that keeps your options open. It gives you a reason to think big. You just got to stay with that pack. You got to stay at least one or two steps behind. That Knicks, Cavs, Heat, Magic pack. If you're just with them.
No, I agree because I think that 560, like I've been saying for a while, like I really think it would be good for this team to play a playoff series. Like I know the play-in counts, but it's like you play one game, 2 game. It's like who knows? Like I think this team would benefit from a full 7-game series, and I think they would actually be really tough to get out depending on who they're playing. And so I hope they can get to that point. And I do look at it like there's some teams like I think. Oddly enough, I think we're a great matchup for the Bucks. Like I think if we play the Bucks, I think Milwaukee should be scared. Milwaukee might win that series, but it's like everyone's like, who guards Giannis? It's like who the hell guards Haliburton on the Bucks? Like that's a real good matchup for the Pacers.
No, they're not doing it. I mean, like again, you've seen 5 games now.
Yeah,
you've seen 5 games now, and the Pacers have won 4 of them, and there's a reason for that. That's not an accident. Like 4 out of 5 ain't an accident.
Yeah.
Like that's I mean they got lucky the first time Dame didn't play, and I think they got some other positive breaks in there, but like I mean they adjusted and like obviously they've decided, okay, like we're not going to cover Giannis one-on-one or just blitz with a double anymore. We're going to try this wall thing and see if it works. And we're just not going to let him get 50, 60. You got to do something different. So there's some, that's a big piece to it. But no, I mean, like they, getting rid of Drew Holiday made them the Pacers a tougher matchup for them.
Yeah.
Like when they had Holiday, I mean, Holiday was special last year. Holiday had 50 last year.
Yeah.
And so,
unfortunately, he stays in the East and it makes the Celtics a tougher matchup. But.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, they ultimately hurt themselves. By putting him on the market so that Boston could go get him. And he hasn't blown me away the way that he did last year. Like he hasn't been as good for the Celtics scoring wise against the Pacers as he was with the Bucks scoring wise, but he's still Drew Holiday and it's there. Like you just got to get in. Yeah. And so he Lillard's been terrible against them. Lillard's been atrocious.
Yeah.
And so, not atrocious. He was pretty good in Vegas, but other than that, he's been pretty bad in the games he's played. So they can win that game. Yeah, full stop. They can win that series. If the Pacers get the 7 and the Bucks are the 2, like they can beat the Bucks.
Yeah, well, I'd like it better if they were the 6, and then we'll wrap up on this. Like I just not have to play the play-ins.
Faded below Philly.
Yeah,
Milwaukee faded below Philly, which is now the question. But it's notable that, as of the time that they won that 4th game, the Pacers were responsible for 40% of the Bucks' losses.
No, it's true. But and I'll end on this. Like I'm 100% with you. You stay with that pack, and then you try and make a push at the end to try and get to that 6th seed, even the 7. So maybe you play one play-in game, and then you're right in. But it's like I would be disappointed if they, just because I think a great next step of growth for this team would be a 7-game series. And we talk about all the things with the Bucks, but you look at like the Celtics, they've had, 2 games there where it's like the in-season tournament. That was like a playoff game. Pacers won that game. The other night, Haliburton gets hurt. Pacers come back. Like the Celtics were playing tough. They didn't want to lose that. Yeah. They won that game. Like the 76ers, they had the 2 games back-to-back. That second game was like a playoff game. The Pacers won that. Like I'm not sure that the Celtics, the Sixers are great matchups, but the Pacers have shown that when like they go at it, they can win those games. So like this is where I think they could make those a fun 6-7 game series, and that would be a great growth experience for the Pacers.
Yeah, no, even if they get their doors blown off, even if they go 4-0, it's better for them to go than not go.
Right.
1. 2, I think it's a big deal if they play Boston or Philly to get a game. That still helps. Even if they get a game, even if it's just game 3 comes to Indiana, first playoff series here in a while, and they win game 3, even if it's a gentleman's sweep, that's still positive. I mean, I think just getting into even if they have to use the play-in round to do it, getting to a 4-game playoff or 7-game playoff series is what matters. They have to just get to one, experience it. Even if they get their doors blown off, just feel it. Just feel that atmosphere. I think that is the baseline for success for this group. Anything else is gravy. But to your point, I mean, they can be dangerous. They can. I don't think they can beat Boston in 7.
No.
But I think they can get 1, and maybe they can get 2. I don't think they can get Philly in 7, but maybe they can get 1, and maybe they can get 2. And again, you got to be able. You have to say out loud again. If you take 4 out of 5 from Milwaukee during the season, that means you can.
Right.
Get them in this best of 7. You can. That doesn't mean you will, but you can. If you play Milwaukee, you got to believe you can win that series. You got to go in believing. And that they will have every reason to believe they can win that series. And so that's not saying that if they get Milwaukee in a best of 7, if they lose it, that they're a failure or something like that. Giannis is Giannis, and when he turns it up for a playoff series, that's going to be a different kind of force right there. Especially because they got beat by Miami last year in the first round. They're not going to want to have something like that happen again.
Right.
But if you swing Milwaukee in a best of 7, if you're Indiana, you got to believe you can take it. And you got to go in there with that belief and not thinking we're just here to have a fun playoff series. You really have to think that they can take it. But yeah, I think anything that gets them in a best of 7 is good. I think if they end up in the play-in as a 7 or 8, I have a real hard time imagining them losing too.
I agree. But I think if they're 8-9, it becomes way more. There's a little more variance, and unfortunately, this team has that ability where there's just nights they're not shooting well, and then it's like the defense exacerbates the problem, and it's like I'm more nervous in that 8-9 spot. But
in a 9, well, because you get to play 7-8 if you're the
9-10. Sorry, the 9-10 spot. Yeah.
9-10 spot. That's where they don't want to be.
Yeah, because then you're just on variance. But to your point, that's where I think it's fair. Like you look at that pack, you stay in the Peloton, you stay in that Peloton group, and you make a push at the end.
Worst case scenario, you're the 8, and you got to win 1 out of 2.
Yeah, and one of them will be at home.
And one of them will be at home. That's your worst case scenario. And you just don't want to be the 9 as long as you just stay well ahead of that Brooklyn, Chicago, Toronto, Atlanta pack, and at least within striking distance of that New York, Cleveland, Orlando, Miami pack. Then you're okay.
It's a wild time though, because if the Raptors, if they end up trading Siakam, it's like they're going to be kind of in tank mode. Like the Hawks might trade Murray. Like who knows? They're kind of a mess, and like the Bulls, like Levine is like. You could be in a spot where it's like the worst you're going to get is 10. It's like everyone just tanks out anyway.
Right, exactly. And you can't even just by showing up every night, you're going to get 10th.
Yeah, you're going to be 10th. Like just by winning a couple games, you'll be in the 8th spot. So we'll see. Well, Dustin, I always love having you on. Great insight. We'll have you on again in February, maybe right after the trade deadline. See it like right before the All-Star Game festivities. But no, really appreciate you having on. Catch him on the Indy Star, everything he does, and have fun on the West Coast road trip, man. Have a good time.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening for Right Up Meridian podcast. This is Scott signing off.